Corruption in India is a major issue that adversely affects its economy. A study conducted by Transparency International in year 2005 found that more than 62% of Indians had first-hand experience of paying bribes or influence peddling to get jobs done in public offices successfully. In its study conducted in year 2008, Transparency International reports about 40% of Indians had first-hand experience of paying bribes or using a contact to get a job done in public office. In 2015, India was ranked 76th out of 175 countries in Transparency International's Corruption Perceptions Index, compared to its neighbors Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar, China, Nepal, Pakistan and Sri Lanka. This is the second least corruption rank for India in the whole of South Asia. Most of the largest sources of corruption in India are entitlement programs and social spending schemes enacted by the Indian government. Examples include Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act and National Rural Health Mission. Other daily sources of corruption include India's trucking industry, which is forced to pay billions in bribes annually to numerous regulatory and police stops on its interstate highways. Indian media has widely published allegations of corrupt Indian citizens stashing trillions of dollars in Swiss banks. Swiss authorities, however, used to deny these allegations. Now it has been proven in 2015-2016. The Indian media is mainly owned by corrupt politicians and industrialists who also play a major role in most of these scams, thus misleading public with wrong information and using media for mudslinging against the political and business opponents. The causes of corruption in India include excessive regulations, complicated taxes and licensing systems, numerous government departments each with opaque bureaucracy and discretionary powers, monopoly by government-controlled institutions on certain goods and services delivery, and the lack of transparent laws and processes. There are significant variations in level of corruption as well as in state government efforts to reduce corruption across India. Politics. As of December 2009, 120 of India's 524 parliament members were accused of crimes under India's first information report procedure, wherein anyone can allege another of committing a crime. Many of the biggest scandals since 2010 have involved very high-level government officials, including cabinet ministers and chief ministers, such as in the 2G Spectrum scam, the 2010 Commonwealth Games scam, the Adarsh Housing Society scam, the coal mining scam, the mining scandal in Karnataka and the cash for vote scam. Bureaucracy. A 2005 study done Transparency International in India found that more than 62% of the people had first-hand experience of paying bribe or peddling influence to get a job done in a public office. Taxes and bribes are common between state borders. Transparency International estimates that truckers pay annually 222 billion rupees in bribes. Government regulators and police share in bribe money, each to the tune of 43% and 45% respectively. The en route stoppages, including those at checkpoints and entry points, take up to 11 hours in a day. About 60% of these stoppages on road by concerned authorities such as government regulators, police, forest, sales and excise, octroi, weighing and measuring department are for extorting money. The loss in productivity due to these stoppages is an important national concern. The number of truck trips could increase by 40% if forced delays are avoided. According to a 2007 World Bank published report, the travel time for a Delhi-Mumbai trip can be reduced by about 2 days per trip if the corruption and associated regulatory stoppages to extract bribes was eliminated. A 2009 survey of the leading economies of Asia revealed Indian bureaucracy to be not only the least efficient out of Singapore, Hong Kong, Thailand, South Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Taiwan, Vietnam, China, Philippines and Indonesia, but also that working with India's civil servants was a slow and painful process. Land and property officials are alleged to steal state property in cities and villages throughout India, consisting of municipal and other government officials, elected politicians, judicial officers, real estate developers and law enforcement officials, acquire, develop and sell land in illegal ways, tendering processes and awarding contracts. A 2006 report claimed state-funded construction activities in Uttar Pradesh, such as road building, were dominated by construction mafias, which are groupings of corrupt public works officials, materials suppliers, politicians and construction contractors. Corruption caused problems in government-funded projects are not limited to the state of Uttar Pradesh. According to the World Bank, aid programs are beset by corruption, bad administration and underpayments. As an example, the report cites only 40% of grain handed out for the poor reaches its intended target. The World Bank study finds that the public distribution programs and social spending contracts have proven to be a waste due to corruption. As an example, the government implemented the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act on 25 August 2005. The central government outlay for this welfare scheme is 400 billion rupees in FY 2010-2011. After 5 years of implementation, in 2011, the program was widely criticized as no more effective than other poverty reduction programs in India. Despite its best intentions, MGNREGA faces the challenges of corrupt officials reportedly pocketing money on behalf of fake rural employees, poor quality of the program's infrastructure, and unintended destructive effect on poverty. Hospitals and health care. In government hospitals, corruption is associated with non-availability, duplication of medicines, getting admission, consultations with doctors and availing diagnostic services. National Rural Health Mission is another health care-related government program that has been subject to large-scale corruption allegations. This social spending and entitlement program hoped to improve health care delivery across rural India. The program has been managed since 2005 by the Ministry of Health of the Indian government. The Indian government mandated a spending of 277 billion rupees in 2004-05 and increased it annually to be about 1% of India's gross domestic product. The National Rural Health Mission program has been clouded by a large-scale corruption scandal in which top government-appointed officials were arrested, several of whom died under mysterious circumstances, including one in prison. Corruption, waste and fraud-related losses from this government program has been alleged to be 100 billion rupees. Science and Technology (CSIR). The Council of Scientific and Industrial Research has been flagged in ongoing efforts to root out corruption in India. Despite being established with the directive to do translational research and create real technologies, CSIR has been accused of transforming into a ritualistic, overly bureaucratic organization that does little more than churn out papers. There are many issues facing Indian scientists, with some, such as MIT systems scientist V. A. Shivarayuduri, calling for transparency, a meritocratic system, and an overhaul of the bureaucratic agencies that oversee science and technology. Sumit Bajuri stated, "The challenges of turning Indian science into part of an innovation process are many. Many competent Indian scientists aspire to be ineffectual administrators, rather than do the kind of science that makes a difference. Prime Minister Manmohan Singh spoke at the 99th Indian Science Congress and commented on the state of the sciences in India, after an advisory council informed him there were problems with the overall environment for innovation and creative work, and a warlike approach was needed. Income Tax Department. There have been several cases of collusion of officials of the Income Tax Department of India for preferential tax treatment and relaxed prosecutions in exchange for bribes. Preferential award of mineral resources. In August 2011, an iron ore mining scandal became a media focus in India. In September 2011, Janardana Reddy, an elected member of Karnataka's Legislative Assembly, was arrested on charges of corruption and illegal mining of iron ore in his home state of Karnataka. It was alleged that his company received preferential allotment of resources, organized and exported billions of dollars worth of iron ore to China in recent years, without paying any royalty to the state government exchequer of Karnataka or the central government of India, and these Chinese companies made payment to shell companies controlled by Reddy and registered in Caribbean and North Atlantic tax havens. It was also alleged that corrupt government officials cooperated with Reddy, starting from government officials in charge of regulating mining to government officials in charge of regulating port facilities and shipping. These officials received monthly bribes in exchange for enabling the illegal export of illegally mined iron ore to China. Such scandals have led to a demand in India for consensually driven action plan to eradicate the piracy of India's mineral resources by an illegal political corrupt government officials business nexus, removal of incentives for illegal mining, creation of incentives for legal mining and domestic use of iron ore and steel manufacturing. Driver licensing. A study conducted between 2004 and 2005 found that India's driver licensing procedure was a hugely distorted bureaucratic process and allows drivers to be licensed despite the low driving ability through promoting the usage of agents. Individuals with high willingness to pay make a significant payment above the official fee, and most of these extra payments are made to agents, who act as an intermediary between bureaucrats and applicants. The average licensee paid 1,080 rupees, approximately 2.5 times the official fee of 450 rupees, in order to obtain a license. On average, those who hired agents had a lower driving ability, with agents helping unqualified drivers obtain licenses and bypass the legally required driving examination. Among the surveyed individuals, approximately 60% of the license holders did not take the licensing exam, and 54% of those license holders failed an independent driving test. Agents of the channels of corruption in this bureaucratic driver licensing system, facilitating access to licenses among those who are unqualified to drive. Some of the failures of this licensing system are caused by corrupt bureaucrats who collaborate with agents by creating additional barriers within the system against those who did not hire agents. Trends. Professor Babek Debroy and Lavish Bandari claim in the book Corruption in India, the DNA and RNA that the public officials in India may be cornering as much as 921 billion rupees, or 1.26% of the GDP, through corruption. The book claims most bribery is in the transport industry, real estate and government-delivered services. Bribery and corruption are pervasive, but some sectors tend to witness a relatively higher degree of such instances. A 20 2013 a study reports following sectors, perceived as the most vulnerable to corruption: infrastructure and AMP, real estate, metals and AMP, mining, aerospace and AMP, defense, power and AMP, utilities. There are a range of specific factors that make a sector more susceptible to bribery and corruption risks than others. Factors like high use of middlemen, large value contracts, liaising activities, etc., drive the depth, volume and frequency of corrupt practices in vulnerable sectors. A 2011 KPMG study reports India's real estate, telecommunications and government-run social development projects as the three topmost corruption-plagued sectors. The study found India's defense, information technology industry and energy sectors are the most competitive and least corruption-prone sectors. CMS India claims in its 2010 India Corruption Study report that socio-economically weaker section of the Indian society is most adversely affected by government corruption. These include the rural and urban poor. The study additionally claims that corruption perception nationwide has decreased between 2005 and 2010. Over the 5-year period, significantly more number of people from the middle class as well as the poorest segments of Indian society surveyed in all parts of the India claimed government corruption had dropped over time, and they had lesser direct experiences with demands for bribes. The table below compares the perceived anti-corruption effort across some of the major states in India. A rising index implies higher anti-corruption effort and falling corruption. According to this table, the states of Bihar and Gujarat have experienced significant improvements in their anti-corruption efforts, while the conditions have worsened in the state of Assam and West Bengal. Consistent with the results in this table, in 2012, a BBC News report claimed the state of Bihar has transformed in recent years to become the least corrupt state in India. Black money. Black money refers to money that is not fully or legitimately the property of the owner. A white paper on black money in India by the Government of India suggests two possible sources of black money in India. The first includes activities not permitted by the law, such as crime, drug trade, terrorism, and corruption, all of which are illegal in India. The second, more likely source is that the wealth may have been generated through a lawful activity but accumulated by failing to declare income and pay taxes. Some of this black money ends up in illicit financial flows across international borders, such as deposits in tax haven countries. A November 2010 report from the Washington-based Global Financial Integrity estimates that over a 60-year period, India lost $213 billion in illicit financial flows beginning in 1948. Adjusted for inflation, this is estimated to be $462 billion in 2010 dollars, or about $8 billion per year. The report also estimated the size of India's underground economy at approximately $640 billion at the end of 2008, or roughly 50% of the nation's GDP. Indian black money in Switzerland. India was ranked 37th by money held by its citizens in Swiss banks in 2004, but then improved its ranking by slipping to 61st position in 2015 and further improved its position by slipping to 75th position in 2016. According to a 2010 The Hindu article, unofficial estimates indicate that Indians had over $1,456 billion in black money stored in Swiss banks, while some news reports claimed that data provided by the Swiss Banking Association report showed India has more black money than the rest of the world combined. A more recent report quoted the SBA's head of international communications publications as saying that no such official Swiss Banking Association statistics exist. Another report said that Indian-owned Swiss bank account assets are worth 13 times the country's national debt. These allegations have been denied by Swiss Bankers Association. James Nasson of Swiss Bankers Association, in an interview about alleged black money from India, holds that the figures were rapidly picked up in the Indian media and in Indian opposition circles, and circulated as gospel truth. However, this story was a complete fabrication. The Swiss Bankers Association never published such a report. Anyone claiming to have such figures should be forced to identify the source and explain the methodology used to produce them. In a separate study, Devkar of Global Financial Integrity concludes, media reports circulating in India that Indian nationals held around $1.4 trillion in illicit external assets are widely off the mark compared to the estimates found by his study. Carr claims the amounts are significantly smaller, only about 1.5% of India's GDP on average per annum basis, between 1948 and 2008. This includes corruption, bribery and kickbacks, criminal activities, trade mispricing and efforts to shelter wealth by Indians from India's tax authorities. According to a third report published in May 2012, Swiss National Bank estimates that the total amount of deposits in all Swiss banks at the end of 2010 by citizens of India were 1.95 billion Swiss francs. The Swiss Ministry of External Affairs has confirmed these figures upon request for information by the Indian Ministry of External Affairs. This amount is about 700-fold less than the alleged $1.4 trillion in some media reports. The report also provided a comparison of the deposits held by Indians and by citizens of other nations in Swiss banks. Total deposits held by citizens of India constitute only 0.13% of the total bank deposits of citizens of all countries. Further, the share of Indians in the total bank deposits of citizens of all countries in Swiss banks has reduced from 0.29% in 2006 to 0.13% in 2010. Domestic black money. Indian companies are reportedly misusing public trusts for money laundering. India has no centralized repository, like the Registrar of Companies for Corporates, of information on public trusts, business and corruption. Public servants have very wide discretionary powers, offering the opportunity to extort undue payments from companies and ordinary citizens. The awarding of public contracts is notoriously corrupt, especially at the state level. Scandals involving high-level politicians have highlighted the payment of kickbacks in the healthcare, IT and military sectors, the deterioration of the overall efficiency of the government, protection of property rights, ethics and corruption, as well as undue influence on government and judicial decisions, has resulted in a more difficult business environment. Judiciary. According to Transparency International, judicial corruption in India is attributable to factors such as delays in the disposal of cases, shortage of judges and complex procedures, all of which are exacerbated by preponderance of new laws. Over the year there have been numerous judges who have faced allegations of corruption. However, in 2011, Sumitra Sen, a former judge at the Kolkata High Court, became the first judge in the India to be impeached by the Rajya Sabha, the upper house of the Indian Parliament, for misappropriation of funds. Armed Forces. The Indian Armed Forces have witnessed corruption involving senior armed forces officers from the Indian Army, Indian Navy and Indian Air Force. A number of scandals in the 2000 to 2010 period damaged the military's reputation. Such scandals included skimming of armed forces money, reselling of government property, and faking combat missions.